COVID-19 pandemic as a global precedent marked the horizons of the future with its new behavioral patterns and the know-hows that have already become conventional in terms of police implementation of top-notch technology that could be collectively referred to as the new normal. The Chinese experience of introducing a social rating system that traces the levels of respecting the law and a general honesty among the population, as well as their consumer behavior on government-controlled territories, the electronic passes introduced in Moscow that allow monitoring a resident's travels and location, the German app that traces contacts with coronavirus patients, CoronaWarn app, as well as a similar French app with the country's leaders in complete self-isolation to maintain control over the situation in the state. This experience and these developments are highly unlikely to lose their importance after the pandemic. A protracted, spasmodically unpredictable and generally unsettling post-pandemic crisis that may potentially become the precondition for a systematic destruction of the basic industries of small and, most importantly, penal businesses will inevitably kickstart an involution of the middle class that has always been the backbone of all of the developed and developing societies in the world to date. This involution, in its turn, will within a frighteningly short time turn the social strata that have until recently flourished into a declassed mass that will rapidly merge into the broad ranks of the world's rabble, making the abyss separating the global rabble from the global elites fatal and uncrossable. Obviously, the fatality of this abyss will arise due to the non-renewability of the collapsed social gateways that over the past centuries were used by a certain part of societal grassroots to step into and join the middle class that was by default endowed with a high degree of loyalty and reverence for the elites and the ruling class. The ruling elites in their turn will at some point, in attempts to seek protection from all conceivable and inconceivable dangers they could fall victims of at the hands of the planet's prevalently proletarian population, start demonstrating an irresistible craving for anonymity and an increasing willingness to identify themselves with impersonalized AI tools to substitute the leader's connection with the people, their interaction with an automated surrogate of the latter. The good intentions proclaimed by the four electronic governance models known to the world today already displaying recently an intuitive pursuit on the collective subconscious level of preparing the ecosystem for the time when technological developments will allow elites to hide behind an electronic smoke haze, removing themselves completely out of the population's sight. Here, we must also pay attention to the historical prerequisites of what we have said above, particularly the fact that over the past 2.5 centuries, the bourgeois class worldwide has almost completely pushed to the outskirts of history its chief rival, the born aristocracy, having ultimately taken its place. This irreversibly victorious bourgeois is losing its interest in games of democracy by the hour, which in turn will with time inevitably lead to permanent loss of significance of the so-called honest national elections. Now, belonging to the ruling class is a commodity, that can only be obtained in exchange for assets in accordance with one's property status, while the price of the entry ticket for joining the elites will only keep growing. Unlike born aristocracy, the bourgeois elites do not require recognition of the masses. Unlike the aristocracy, it presides over society, not in the right of some sort of selection by inheritance, but rather opposes itself to crowds of losers it had not so long ago come out of itself. The time when the elites will grow completely indifferent to any display to media narcissism is not too far off. When this moment arrives, noisy national meetings with their leaders standing up high on great pedestals, along with lofty speeches from TV screens, will be suddenly forgotten. Parliamentary and government sittings won't be broadcasted anymore, with bars and office parties filled with dazzling ladies adorned with diamonds disappearing, along with long lines of limousines that used to line the most prestigious streets, and enormous yachts will cease to anchor at public quays. Common people will no longer be able to follow online the flights of supersonic jets with VIPs on board. By the time, I would say civil aviation as such, i.e. aviation available to everyone, will cease to exist. A large number of iron-winged monsters cutting through the fragile atmosphere of our Earth pronounced a global and irreparable damage to the environment that must at all costs be averted. However, the life of luxury led by the elites will, of course, not only remain, it will become even more luxurious, but from now on, it will pass unseen to the eyes of billions of curious clockers, undetectable to the video cameras of their stereotyped gadgets or any other means of surveillance. Ruling elites will seek and find more and more opportunities of distancing themselves more and more from the global plebeian class, now separating from it not by building fortresses and barbed wires, but the unavailability of information related to their existence and their mode of life. And this will become one of the elites' existential necessities. We will further discuss the key factors that will condition this necessity. Let us presently make a brief summary of the sort of life the global plebeian class will apparently have in mid- and long-term perspectives. Within a rather brief period of time, countless quarters will fill all of the Earth's megapolises, as well as the world's largest cities, including their most fashionable areas, the downtowns with all of their formerly golden skyscrapers, and the Chinese ghost towns that at present stand empty and uninhabited, awaiting their hour. All of these human anthills with their stench, their dysfunctional elevators and half-dead plumbing systems are destined to become permanent breeding farms of all possible infections, domestic violence, drug abuse and dealing, child prostitution and human trafficking, and society will consequently develop herd immunity and an almost zoological self-regulation, commonly known as the law of the jungle. The urban environment will, in its entirety, inevitably turn into one gigantic multi-story favela subject to ongoing destruction due to the constantly growing fatal accident rate. At the same time, there will be particularly no population left outside megapolises and urban agglomerations. Moreover, living outside urban areas will be strictly prohibited. The rural population that will cease to exist completely will be replaced by robotic means of growing, harvesting, and processing crops. Under the banner of environmental protection, fighting global warming and the other gratism, animal husbandry, poultry farming, fishing and gardening will be outlawed. Large inland territories of farmland will be equipped with fully automated systems for growing genetically modified grain and vegetables. And closer to the seas and oceans, in bays and on giant floating platforms adjusted for the purpose, millions of tons of genetically modified algae will be grown in the same mechanized way. Along with this, the surrounding skyscraper constructions and other large structures will be used for automated vertical farming, thus making the production of genetically modified crops within the city possible, which will simplify logistics and reduce product losses. All of the cultures grown this way, but first and foremost the genetically modified algae, will serve as raw material for 3D printing of food with completely fake delicacies imitating anything, even human flesh, which with compulsory and strictly controlled veganism will sublimate potential cannibalism in the global plebs. In the meanwhile, absolutely real cannibalism will become a special privilege of the top layers of organized criminal groups. For the lower standing representatives of the criminal world, live meat will be obtained from dogs, cats, rats, bats, crows, pigeons, snakes, and other creatures that can be found in city areas that will be hunted in slums for the purpose. Common people, however, will be strictly prohibited from owning, let alone breeding, any animals at home. This will place the criminal world on top of the food chain in the direct sense of the word, serving even subconsciously as confirmation of their dominance. Ripped claws, unkempt body and hair, aggressive semantics on tattoos and piercings, grimaces, screaming, growling, expectoration, spitting, blowing the nose, and even defecation in the middle of the street will be the norm and an integral part of everyday life. Street fights without rules, BDSM performances, and finally, public executions will become the chief form of entertainment. Displays of sodomy and even necrophilia in public places won't embarrass or shock anyone. Against this background, the institution of marriage will almost completely degenerate, and incest, at the same instant, will turn into a commonplace practice. In general, the Overton window open to such savage primitivity, to put this mildly, will for a certain time serve as a survival prerequisite for both the plebs, stripped of all connection with the ruling elites, and for the ruling elites controlling large crowds of the plebs remotely and anonymously. At the same time, the NBIC convergence of life support technologies for the elites will make any direct connection with the unemployed population living on an unconditional basis income, UBI, not merely objectively unnecessary, but also very dangerous for the ruling class. In other words, the final transition from the fifth to the sixth technological mode will expand and deepen the aforementioned fatal abyss between the elites and the plebs of the world. AI-controlled robotic life support systems designed for all categories of the planet's population will eliminate the need for any kind of education for the lower class. The revolution performed by the magician Steve Jobs, that of replacing ordinary text with icons, smileys, and other symbols, throwing us 6,000 years back, will make the ability to merely read and write an absolutely optional skill for a large part of the world's plebs. It is noteworthy that about 750 million people in the world today are illiterate, most of them living in the so-called third world countries. This already constitutes rather a large part of our planet's population, which means that with time, the number of those unable to read or write will just have to increase, which will be achieved, among other means, by introducing a fully digitized online education system, utilizing choice-based robotic educational programs. As the economist Paul Krugman has said, intelligent machines make intelligent people unnecessary. This will inevitably entail permanent changes in the cerebral cortex of the human brain and affect its speech centers like the Wernicke area and Broca's area. Along with this, the visual environment of the global favela, starting with tattoos on the body and ending with graffiti on the walls, will turn into a vast web of magical symbols and signs. And reading information from them will become the task of urban shamans and interpreters possessing special talents and knowledge. Then all kinds of occult practices, white and black magic, healing, countless types of divination, spells, and charms will flourish with the most disgusting primeval rites and bloody rituals springing